Hey there, science guys! As you can see in the title, in this video I'm going to talk with Ryan MacDonald, astrophysicist and one of the 100 Mars One candidates who remained in the selection process. Firstly, I would like to tell you that he's doing an amazing job at inspiring and making sure everyone knows and understands the Mars One project, a private non-profit company that wants to establish a self-sustaining civilization on Mars. He even has a YouTube channel, Martian Colonist, where he posts monthly updates about Mars One and Mars in general, as well as many other interesting videos. Make sure to take a look and subscribe if you like it. Talking about subscribing, this is a Spanish channel, so if you just speak English, I don't recommend you to subscribe. But if you like the video, let me know by clicking the like button and leaving a comment. With nothing else to say, let's begin.
Hello, Miguel. I can hear you, but I'm not getting any video through from your end.
Yes, I don't have a webcam now.
Ah, you don't have webcam. Okay, that's fair enough. As long as you can
Alright.
see me, that's most important.
Maybe I should start introducing myself. My name is Miguel, as you know. I'm 15 years old. I live in Spain. And well, because of my age, I haven't studied anything yet about space or physics officially, but I'm really interested in space and science in general, so everything I know I've learned reading books and in the internet.
Well, that sounds a lot like how I was when I was your age. I mean, I was always disappointed at how little about space I was learning in school, so I pretty much just went ahead and just taught myself it anyway. And once you get older, obviously, progressively, you get more and more of a chance to specialize. But no, I understand completely where you are at the moment.
Yes, hopefully now in YouTube, everyone can publish what they want. So there are now, even in Spanish, some new channels who are doing a really good job. So I've prepared some questions and
Okay.
then two themes of conversation. We spoke about that, terraforming Mars and life in the universe. So if there's no problem, I start, right?
Yep, let's go ahead then.
Well, the first question. Do you think 2026 is a feasible target for the departure of the Crew 1?
Ah, the first human crew to Mars. It depends on a lot of factors. I mean, it's very easy in order for there to be a delay in any space mission, but particularly for missions going to Mars, because you miss the launch window and you have to then wait 2 years until the next Hoffman transfer window. So I know that people like Elon Musk have been pushing for roughly the 2025 timeframe. That, though, is contingent on things like a successful Red Dragon mission in 2018, and it's already looking like that might be pushed back till 2020 or even 2022. So my personal estimate, once you account for delays, is that probably roughly the 2031 timeframe is feasible for private enterprise and governmental initiatives like NASA. I mean, unless they had a sudden increase in their budget, then we're talking potentially around 2040 or so. So my estimate, 2031 is the feasible timeframe.
All right. Well, I go to the next one. Advice, long question incoming. The Mars One in the Mars One webpage, there is an image of the spaceship that would take people to Mars. But as I've seen, Mars One only does the training, the events, and the founding, not the hardware and the machines. So, which company are you going to work with for the spacecraft and the Mars colony hardware? You know, the bases and all the stuff.
Yeah, so for the transit habitat that's part of the spaceship, they would be looking at working with Bigelow Aerospace for the inflatables. So they haven't actually begun the process of commissioning the design studies for that yet. They're targeting 2018 or 2019 for that, because they're much more focused on the demonstration missions, which would be entirely robotic before the actual transit vehicle for the people. But it's Bigelow that's being considered for that. And so obviously they already have a module docked to the space station at the moment, so there's still a few more years needed to go down that route before that is then ready. As to the actual surface modules, a lot of work that Mars One have been doing has been partnered with the Paragon Space Development Corporation based in Arizona in the United States. That's been focused on life support, for instance. So Mars One has already had one study commissioned with Paragon, and results for that were released in 2015, which is available for the public to take a look at. There will be more design work done with Paragon over the years, mainly because the key result of that is that the life support modules would have to be around 5 metric tons in terms of their mass, and Mars One had previously designed to potentially land 2.5 tons on Mars. So it's a continual design iteration process. So now Mars One are getting back in touch with Lockheed Martin to redesign some of the landing systems, so they can then get in touch with Paragon, and you see how you have to jump between different companies and iterate back and forth also. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Yes. So the images and the colony and the spacecraft are not they may be totally different.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, the images themselves were made back in 2011 or so, and a lot of them were based on the Red Dragon concept back then. And so it will be radically different, since Mars One is mainly looking at partnering with Lockheed Martin for the actual landing systems. And you'll also see on all the surface art, you see the modules just sat on the surface of Mars. That won't be the case. They will actually be submerged in about 3 to 5 meters of Martian soil for radiation protection. But if they just drew that, then you wouldn't be able to see the modules, so that was done more for artistic license than for actual practicality. So
Sure.
yes, the real things would look quite different from the sketches.
Yeah, security is before being cute. So the next one is in percentage. What are the chances, in your opinion, Mars One has to be successful?
Oh, well, so that depends on how you define successful. So, in my mind, they've already achieved some success in terms of the various educational and inspirational activities we as candidates have going on all around the world.
Sure.
If you define success in terms of, say, the first demonstration mission actually going to Mars, which would cost around 400 million US dollars or so,
Just that?
then, sorry, go ahead, what was that?
Just 4 million?
400 million.
Oh.
So 400 million just to put the first demonstration mission, which would basically be like a repeat of NASA's Phoenix mission from 2007. That would cost about 400 million, at a similar price than what SpaceX is paying for the Red Dragon mission, for instance. Then probabilities of that, I would probably put personally around 5 to 10% or so.
Is that?
Because it is not easy. It's not easy to raise the finances. I don't think the technology is a problem at all for Mars One.
I definitely didn't
but
expect that.
the finances are much harder.
All right. What do you think is the most challenging objective to accomplish or problem to solve in the Mars One project?
Getting the money to pull it off. That's single-handedly the most challenging issue. I mean, in Mars One's original plans, they wanted to have the astronauts going into full-time training in summer of 2015. And obviously we're a year beyond that at the moment, and they're still going on with the selection process. All the delays they've had to date have not been due to technological hurdles. It's purely been it's taken longer to get the finances in. So that's the biggest challenge.
And if you had the money, what would be the biggest one?
If you had the money, what would be the biggest one? That's an interesting question. So it's probably dealing with the unexpected issues, such as we saw recently the issue with SpaceX and their Amos 6 payload being destroyed, and they still don't know what caused that. So let's say that in one of the early missions that Mars One sent to Mars, it failed during the entry, descent, and landing protocol, which is statistically the most risky part of the entire procedure. The question is, how many failures could Mars One actually afford before they then wouldn't be able to go ahead with that? Because they want to land at least 8 missions successfully before the first human landing, and so having a perfect track record across 8 missions is probably unlikely. They can probably afford 1 failure, but can they afford 2? So, in short, the entry, descent, and landing protocol is the greatest challenge. It's incredibly difficult to land large payloads on Mars.
All right. So now a more personal question. What has been your personal experience in the project, and how do you expect it to be in the future?
My personal experiences of the Mars One project? Well, It's been an absolutely incredible experience. So there's the personal aspect, which is that at the moment I'm in touch with an incredible community of 100 potential astronaut candidates around the world. I've met over 30 of them myself, and it means that whenever I'm going to a different country or popping around the world, there's always people over there that I can interact with, and well, it actually helped quite a bit when I was over at a research conference in California recently, and so there were some fellow Mars One candidates there who helped drive me to the airport and back and all of that. So very convenient from that. The selection process itself has been an immensely rewarding experience. So I remember when I had my online interview with the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Norbert Kraft, having a chance to then sit down and spend about 15 minutes or so and speaking to one of the world's most preeminent scientists in human spaceflight. I mean, many people were terrified about their interviews because they knew that their candidacy was on the line. But I actually finished the interview in 10 minutes and spent the final 5 minutes just asking him about his research and what he was doing, because how often do you get a chance like that? And obviously since that, I've had a chance to meet many people, actually probably all of the key Mars One team members in person. In particular, when I attended the Mars One VIP event in Amsterdam last June, all of the key team members and their investors were there, and so it was nice to meet them in person. Although, I mean, I've met Baz like probably 4 or so times in person. So, I mean, they're an absolutely wonderful team. They're so enthusiastic about getting humans to Mars, and they've been devoting their lives to it for the past 3-4 years or so. So, no, it's just been great to meet people who have such shared and common interests, but also are so incredibly diverse. So, yeah, it's been a very rewarding experience.
Um, so now, talking about money, more or less, how much money do you think the whole mission, not just the first mission, just the whole mission, how much money do you think that requires in total?
Right, so Mars One initially estimated $6 billion, although I think that's on the low end, because so I already mentioned how they're re-evaluating the landing systems thanks to the result from the preliminary Paragon study. So I think it would be possible to do it roughly on the order of $10 billion or so. So maybe between 10 and 20 billion or so. And it's worth noting that that is obviously quite cheap compared to previous missions that have been proposed by space agencies. An example return mission architecture from the Mars Society, the Mars Direct program, estimated a cost of about $36 billion or so on the cheap end. But a lot of that comes in from the differences between a return mission architecture and a one-way mission architecture, etc., etc. But I think it could be done for between 10 and $20 billion.
All right. Um, what do you think the rest of the of the world thinks about the mission, and what do you tell the people who think Mars One will fail?
Oh, what do I think the rest of the world? So it's interesting because if you look, for instance, every time there has been a major announcement from Mars One, most recently, for instance, the announcement of the final 100 candidates in the selection process, everyone around, there's been so much excitement generated by that. I mean, I basically lost 2 weeks of my life just from media calling me up, traveling to London almost every day for interviews, and people wanted to know about when we will see humans going on Mars and how they could be a part of this story. So I think generally the world is really excited just by the concept of people going to Mars and eventually living on Mars. So generally I would say that was quite positive. There of course is always criticism and negativity, and constructive criticism on the technical aspects and the challenges is always welcomed, and that's great because you can then take on board the criticism, redesign your mission, and then improve it. I mean, that's a vital part of the scientific process, being able to evaluate flaws and then iterate and improve upon them. So there was a second part to your question, but I've forgotten what it was though. So can you repeat?
Yeah, sure. What would you tell the people who think Mars One will fail?
The people that think Mars One will fail. Well, so that depends a lot on who the people are, because sometimes you can get people that just, well, I've had people attacking my YouTube channel recently who are convinced that the Earth is flat, for instance. You can't convince certain people because they think space doesn't exist. I'm not kidding. But if people just think that Mars One will fail, but they have legitimate reasons for that, either on the funding side or the technology, then I'll just say, give it a chance. Look at the work that Mars One have already accomplished. with their limited financial resources to date, in terms of having established aerospace providers like Lockheed Martin, SSTL, and Paragon do design studies, and then Mars One have released them into the public domain for anyone to use to work on their own missions to Mars. Given what they've managed to accomplish on their limited resources, give them a chance, and you'll see what they might be able to do. Because even if they do fail with their long-term goals of having humans on Mars, right now they are making a contribution that will help anyone planning a mission to Mars in the future.
All right, so now it's the last question before going to the conversation part. So surviving on Mars is not going to be easy, and anything could go wrong. So there are a lot of people, myself not included, who think you have to be a bit crazy to do that. So what do you tell that people to convince it isn't so mad?
So ultimately, you have to have a very good idea in your mind as to why you want to go to Mars. What do you want to extract from that? So basically for me, as a scientist, the focus of my scientific career is on trying to address the question of whether there is life elsewhere in the universe. Now, obviously, that's what I work on myself when working on exoplanets, looking for evidence of life in other solar systems. But if I can go to Mars and actually look for evidence of past or even present life on Mars, sequence its genetic code, and find out if it's related to life on Earth, or potentially if it's even completely genetically distinct, that discovery could potentially change the very meaning of our very understanding of what it means to be human. Because, for instance, if we find out that life on Mars is related to life on Earth, but the point of divergence is actually before the first life that we know on Earth thus far, it shows that life might have actually started on Mars first and been transported to Earth via an early impactor event. Or if it is completely distinct and two next-door neighbour planets had life start about the same time as soon as it was possible, then that tells us that life is an inevitable consequence of the laws of physics and chemistry, and therefore will be common throughout the entire universe. But we can only make this discovery if we actually send people to Mars, and not just for a short stay to go there, collect some rock samples and bring them back. We need a fully staffed research outpost on Mars to definitively answer this question. And the implications for finding the answer, it's like answering one of these age-old philosophical questions people have had for thousands of years. And we can only do that with trained scientists on the surface of Mars.
Right. Well, I really hope you find dead life, but not life, that is now there, because there are a lot of people who think if you discover that Mars is for the Martians, so we shouldn't go there. And I think Mars is a too interesting place for us to just leave it because there are some bacteria.
Well, that's an interesting question, because if we find out that the life on Mars is actually related to life on the Earth, then there's not really a problem there. We're just part of one common biosphere. And indeed, you could consider that since Mars used to be a much more hospitable planet in the distant past, about 3.5 billion years ago or so, then if we go to Mars, and in the longer term we're looking at processes like terraforming Mars, it's not us contaminating Mars. What we're doing is restoring Mars to its original state, the state at which those bacteria originally evolved. And there will always be parts of Mars, such as on the top of Olympus Mons, for instance, that are at such high altitudes that the atmospheric conditions, even if you terraform the entire planet, would still be comparable to what they are on Mars today. So we're not going there and just wiping out Martian microbes or doing anything along those lines. But I certainly understand the points about being very careful to avoid planetary contamination and making sure that we're not destroying the extant Martian ecosystem. But I don't think that should be an inherent reason why we should not go there to explore.
Well, that's a very interesting way to end, because we're now going to start with terraforming.
Okay.
I've heard some really mad things that. Do you think? Well, not directed to me, but people thinking that we are maybe going to destroy Mars as we are destroying Earth. But I think Mars is already dead. All we can do is improve it.
That's an excellent point, because consider we have gotten very good at accidentally modifying the atmosphere of our own planet by pumping CO2 and greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Consider what we could do if we could put our mind towards it. Because the actions that we're taking right now here on Earth would actually do a huge amount of good for increasing the average temperature on Mars. Indeed, there are certain super greenhouse gases we could deliberately produce. I always forget the names of them. They're like octofluoropropane, I believe, is one.
I've seen some documentaries, much better than CO2.
Oh, many, many times. Even methane is about like 1,000 times more capable than CO2. I mean, it's pretty easy to warm up a planet if you want to.
Yes, and especially as Mars is smaller than Earth.
It is smaller. The main issue is that it has substantially less gravity because of its lower mass as well. And so that obviously means that any atmosphere that you give it via terraforming won't stay there indefinitely. And people often, when they object to terraforming, always they say, but Mars doesn't have a magnetic field, so what's the point? And that is people getting confused on issues of timescales. In fact, we know precisely how many grams per year of Mars's atmosphere is being lost. We obtained these measurements recently from NASA's MAVEN mission. The point is that if you gave Mars an Earth-like atmosphere and did nothing, it would take millions of years for the atmosphere to be stripped away. So on a human timescale, it actually is only a very small amount you have to add to the atmosphere each year in order to maintain it. So it's not even a problem that Mars doesn't have a magnetic field.
But talking about the magnetic fields, yes, I've listened to lots of conferences of specialists and watched lots of videos, but they all say that we don't know how to deal with the problem of the magnetic field. But I think there's a way, because I think I saw it in a video, but I haven't seen any, step-by-step way to terraform Mars. But just we can create an artificial magnetic field by putting some huge wires around Mars, with a lot of energy power, like the Hyperloop, which Elon Musk is planning. It should be something like that, but instead of something like a train going inside, just copper or aluminum or anything, and solar panels in the top, just going around Mars, and that would create an artificial magnetic field, right?
Yeah, although you have to be careful here, because what you're doing right now is trying to solve a 23rd century problem with 21st century technology. There probably will be much more elegant solutions, probably using things such as nanotechnology that we will have in the future. But you are right that if you had a giant superconducting magnet going around the equator of Mars, yes, in principle, that could generate a geomagnetic field, but it's just not something that's going to be feasible for the foreseeable future. But I argue that the magnetic field isn't a problem that needs to be solved in order to terraform Mars. It's one that, if you want the atmosphere to be stable for millions of years, you would have to solve. But then consider obviously how much we've advanced just in the last century or so. We don't need to be solving a problem that will be a problem millions of years from now with today's technology. Focus on the more immediate issues such as thickening the atmosphere, raising the temperature, etc., and also obviously converting the oxygen fraction in the atmosphere. So the magnetic field it's not a showstopper, and we do have some ideas, but I would say don't commit your resources to solving that problem yet. Wait a few centuries.
Well, I've just spent some hours of thinking, not a single euro. But yes, so with a colony on Mars, I think when you have it self-sustaining, and when would be the time to start mining? Because I think when you start mining there, then you start progressing, because even if you are self-sustaining, if you don't mine the resources of the red planet, you can just advance if they send something to you on Earth. So what do you think is the time to start mining?
That depends a lot on what kind of infrastructure you have on Mars. If you're doing an approach like Mars One was proposing, where you have 4 people and every 2 years you get 4 more people or so, then I imagine it would take quite some time to establish the infrastructure for that. You're talking on the order of decades or so. If you're looking at something potential on the lines of the Mars Colonial Transporter architecture that Elon Musk will be unveiling shortly enough, where you have potentially 100 or so people going at a time,
Well,
then I think people will be surprised how rapidly that
I
emerges.
think Elon Musk decided the new name for the Mars Colonial Transporter. I don't remember now which was
Yeah,
it.
I saw some of his posts on Twitter where it's not entirely clear if he has decided on a name. I know that someone proposed something like the Interplanetary Transfer Craft or something along those
I
lines.
prefer the
I mean,
Mars
we'll have to
Colonial
wait until the
Transporter.
actual announcement itself. I prefer Mars Colonial
Yes,
Transporter. It
it's
really,
much cooler.
it gives you a science fiction feel, doesn't it?
Yes, because if they tell you Mars Colonial Transporter, Mars isn't there, so you know that spacecraft is specially designed to take us to Mars. I've been interested in Mars since I have memory. Well, that's not true, but um, yes, the other sounds like more like multi-useful thing.
Mm. Well, the question then is, what else are you going to use it for? Where else are you going to go if you're not going to Mars? Sure, you can go and deploy some inflatables in the clouds of Venus. You don't want to go to Mercury. There's nothing interesting going on there. Jupiter is a deadly radiation belt. It takes years to get there. I mean, the only other place really of potential interest would be going and setting up shop in the asteroid belt and looking for
Well,
resources out there.
Jupiter and Saturn
Obviously, the
moons
moon, of
are
course. Yes, but you're talking Hohmann transfers to Saturn or so. You're talking it's taking you like 7 years or so to get there, and then you have all the issues of how do you keep people comfortable and sane for 7 years on that kind of mission, and
well.
there's all manner of
If,
problems associated with going
if
that
it's a
far out.
spacecraft capable of carrying 100 people to Mars, then it sure can have the space and resources to take less people, but comfortable to further
Well,
away.
it can, but can they be comfortable for 7 years? That's the interesting question, because Elon said that he's making the MCT only take 3 months to go to Mars because he didn't think it would be a comfortable enough experience spending the standard 6 months to go to Mars. So that seems to imply that the MCT might not actually be that comfortable for 7 years. But obviously we're speculating at the moment, so we don't really know.
Yes, but I think that spacecraft, the Mars Colonial Transporter or whatever the name, I think it would be much cheaper to instead of making a huge rocket like the currently named Big Fucking Rocket,
Mm.
to take it into space every time it's used. I think that's an enormous waste of money. I think it would be much better to put a lot of money initially to create a really small space station, so that you can have the transporter in space all the time and on Mars. So if you want to take people to space, you just use the Dragon 2, for example, or another spacecraft, and you send lots of them to the station with less cost, and then they go on board.
Well, so you'll actually be surprised how cheap the BFR will likely be to fly because it's designed to be reusable and actually fly back to the launch site. So, I mean, obviously they're pioneering that with the Falcon 9 at the moment. So the plan likely would be for the MCT actually to go into orbit almost like a space station like you're alluding to there, and then the people themselves to then board by going up in Dragon 2s, for instance. So you will actually have something similar to that, where the MCT is almost like a space station. But recall that you don't want to have a permanent space station that you're assembling in orbit. I mean, just the International Space Station cost $100 billion to assemble, and so obviously those prices will go down when you have inflatable space stations and all those things that Bigelow is working on. But I think the architecture they're going for at the moment with reusable BFR and MCTs, I think that's the best way to go.
Yes, and I've heard that recently that Blue Origin has shown its intentions to create a really big rocket.
Yeah, we're looking at about Falcon Heavy class.
Yes, the New Glenn.
Yes.
I've read that the Falcon Heavy has 5 million pounds of thrust or something like that, and the New Glenn has 3.70 something.
Yes, that sounds correct.
So they are going to be similar, but I thought Blue Origin was just taking people to space, just paying, not doing any scientific thing.
Well, we don't actually know that much. Blue Origin have well, Jeff Bezos has stated that he's a major space nerd and his long-term ambition is to have millions of people living and working in space. We don't really know that much about their long-term ambitions. Their short-term was that they wanted to get space tourism up and running with their New Shepard vehicle, which potentially, I hope late next year we might see some human flights on that. They're doing really good work. So we don't really know what New Glenn would really be used for. Obviously launching heavy satellites and all of that. I know there's some speculation that Bezos is much more focused on the moon, for instance. So we'll see. And one of the great things about Jeff Bezos is that as the second richest man in the world, he can just not have to worry about being profitable and he's worth about $66 billion. So he can just self-fund it himself to a much greater extent than Elon Musk can.
That means that he could just, I don't understand, but if he's so, focused on space, if you say that amount of money, he could pay easily the Mars One mission entirely.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of billionaires that could just self-fund Mars One if they wanted to.
But so why do you think he hasn't done it?
Well, I mean, he's got his own projects he's going ahead with. I don't know. I mean, Mars One has had a lot of high net worth individuals that they've spoken to over the years to look at that. But I think Mars One needs to achieve many more small incremental steps in order to demonstrate their viability. For instance, if they can actually land their first demonstration mission on Mars, then it'll be much easier to persuade billionaires to get on board.
Yes, so...
I mean, you don't become a billionaire if you just give out billions to anyone who wants it.
Going to Mars isn't like buying a new car. I mean, you gain a name in the history.
Yeah, you gain immortality effectively.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be an easy sell for me, definitely. So we'll see. I imagine many billionaires are just particularly cautious about it. They need to know that it wouldn't be wasted money and that it could actually happen. If they were confident it would happen, I'm sure you'd have quite a few setting up colonies on Mars.
Well, going back to Mars terraforming, I've heard that they say that the final step when it's warm up and we have an atmosphere again, water running, do you think, they say that we should grow plants, but I think if you are trying to make the atmosphere breathable, plants are really inefficient.
They're far too slow. You're talking on the order of about 10,000 years or so if you use just photosynthesis.
I think, photosynthesis, I think it's a good idea, but I've heard some bacteria do 10 times better than just plants. So I think it's cyanobacteria.
Well, even better. Genetically modify superbacteria which can survive in the conditions on Mars and are incredibly efficient at photosynthesis. That would be an easy way to do it.
Yes, so...
But remember, it depends how much resources you have. You could literally just have factories that take in CO2, break the double-double bond, and then just pump out oxygen, for instance. You can. That's just incredibly energy intensive. So it all depends on how long you want to wait.
Yes, and how much money you have.
Yeah, infinite resources, then you could easily convert the majority CO2 atmosphere into about 20% oxygen in about 100 years or so if you had infinite resources.
Yes, but it's I don't know, because on Earth all about Mars costs a lot of money, but when you have some cities on there, do you think that when they decide to start the terraforming process, money would be involved, or they would just do it?
Well, we don't even know if the Martian society will even have a concept of money. I mean, it could be radically different. Likely, it would just be something that everyone would contribute some of their resources towards because they would recognize it as being an important thing that would improve their quality of life decades down the line. So, I mean, I've seen cost estimates looking at how the initial phase of terraforming, where you heat up the planet to the point where water can actually exist as a liquid, that can be done for about $1 trillion or so. And that obviously sounds like a lot, but remember that the United States spent about $2 trillion on the Iraq War, for instance. So getting a partially habitable second planet for half the cost of the Iraq War is a pretty good deal, actually.
Yes. I think the United States, that's another point, because the money that Mars One would cost is just a tiny fraction of the United States money, or almost any other country.
It's a tiny fraction of even what NASA's yearly budget is.
So I'm not sure what the hell are they doing with their budget. I think they're just sitting there looking their medals and prizes and just sometimes working.
The issue is that it's a lot of political issues. It's that basically, if you want to build a rocket in NASA, in order to get the political support for the project, you have to have each individual component for the rocket manufactured in a different state, such that the senator that controls that state approves it because it's a jobs program. That's why NASA's space launch system that they want to use for Mars is so expensive. You're talking over $1 billion for every single launch of it. And the Falcon Heavy will be almost as good as the SLS. And that will cost less than $100 million to launch. And that's even if it's not reusable, which it will be. So it's just silly what they're doing. It's jobs programs, and it's about, and there's not the political will. If a president said we're going to Mars in 10 years, it would happen. They've got the money to do it, just not the focus. That's the problem, and it's really a pity.
Yes, I'm talking about rockets. NASA's with the SLS, SpaceX is with the Falcon Heavy, and the new huge rocket. But Europe is, I think they have they're working on the Iran 6, but I think, as I've heard, Europe isn't the good thing at making rockets, right?
Well, the Ariane 5 is actually pretty much the safest rocket in the world. The Ariane 5 is what we're going to be using to launch the James Webb Space Telescope. NASA doesn't even trust American companies to launch that, because that's an $8 billion mission, so they want the safest rocket in the world to launch it. So the European Space Agency, and obviously like Ariane Space, safe rockets that are quite expensive. The Ariane 6 is designed to get down the cost. But then even if they get down the cost by 30%, which is what they're proposing, it won't be operational until about 2020 or so. And obviously, SpaceX is becoming cheaper and cheaper with each year as it goes on. So we'll see. There are proposals for additional designs that could have reusable engines and all of this going on. So Europe is pushing forward with trying to compete. But that's their private launch sector. I wouldn't mind if the European private launch sector just lost in competition to cheaper launchers from the States. I just want space access to be available cheaply for everyone. That would just then free up resources for the European Space Agency to do things like focusing on their international moon village, which I know the Director General is very fond of. So Europe is not going to suddenly stop becoming involved. In particular, Europe is absolutely fantastic at scientific missions in space. Part of the reason for that is when you have so many member states agreeing to fund a project, it's very difficult to cancel it. In the United States, missions get cancelled all of the time just due to political reasons. In the European Space Agency, it's quite rare for a mission to get cancelled, and generally they go ahead and happen. So ESA is really, really good for getting science done in space. So I'm very proud of the European Space Agency, and I'm glad we're all a part of it.
Yes, but the other day it was some time ago, but Elon Musk said that there's a quick way to terraform Mars, which is bombarding the poles. I personally don't like the idea at all. I admire Elon Musk a lot, but bombarding the poles, I think it's a bit extreme. And
yeah, that's more. I think he meant it as a joke. I mean, there are more clever things you can do. Like you could actually cover the pole in a special type of algae, which is actually very dark in colour. Just by doing that, more sunlight will be absorbed at the poles and it will raise the temperature and start the subliming process. That would be a much easier way to do it than dropping nukes on the poles.
Yes, and how do you see nuclear fusion as a source of energy for Mars in the long term, as it has a lot of water?
That's an interesting question. So nuclear fusion isn't I don't think we should wait for nuclear fusion. It's promising, but there's not enough. Yeah. There's not enough resources going into it.
You can use solar panels and all sources of energy, but when it's available,
solar panels, and this is true for the Earth as well. I think that most of our energy in the future will just come from solar power. Solar panels are becoming cheaper each year to build. They're becoming more efficient. Nuclear power definitely is required once you go beyond Mars, like to Jupiter or to Saturn. But I don't think it's necessary, at least in the initial century or so, for Mars.
All right. But as Mars was covered by water, mostly in the north hemisphere, um, when you select the perfect place for the colony, do you are you going to take in account that if you terraform Mars, maybe that place is going to be covered in water, or
Ah. So that's not being taken into account at the moment. For the first small colonies, you would target about 40 to 45 degrees north, which is basically just a trade-off between temperature and water resources. So eventually, those kind of latitudes would get covered up. But when you're talking centuries later, it's better to plan for where will be best for the initial settlement in terms of it being able to actually establish itself. So no, that's not being taken into account at the moment.
all right. So I think maybe we can go now to life in the universe.
Okay, great.
Yes, we have now the discovery of Proxima b, but I have a question. It's a small thing, but why did they call it Proxima b? Because they usually the first planet is usually the letter A. Why not Proxima A?
In the exoplanet naming convention, the first planet is always given a B. The reason for that is because the A is usually reserved for the star or a binary component.
I didn't know that. All right.
So yeah, all first planets are given the letter B.
So, I'm really interested in habitable planets, and that even my Spanish YouTube channel is really focused on that, and and I'm I'm not really optimistic about Proxima b. I mean, it's a great thing that Proxima b is that near to Earth, but red dwarfs aren't the great thing because um, there's a lot of radiation, and the planet is probably one side always looking into the star and the other one just
Yeah.
frozen.
Well, there have actually been a number of papers which have come out on Archive in the last few weeks or so, where scientists have run simulations to actually look at whether Proxima b in principle could be habitable if it was both tidally locked and subject to large X-ray fluxes. And surprisingly, there are actually non-negligible regions of parameter space where it could actually be a habitable planet. I mean, the bigger issue is that we don't even know if Proxima b is a rocky planet at the moment. We don't even know its mass or its size. So there's a lot of things you would have to know to assess whether it's habitable, but in principle, it could be habitable. That's the takeaway. When I actually make a dedicated video on Proxima b, I will be talking about the actual probabilities and the models and all of that. But it's a non-zero probability that it could be habitable, and that's absolutely definitely worth exploring
Yes,
further.
sure. With the Starshot project with Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the immediate future, I'm very hopeful we'll get a transit out of it. The geometric transit probability is only about 1.5%, but if it transits, I mean, we'd have to be very lucky for this, then we could actually be talking about probing its atmosphere or seeing if it has an atmosphere.
It has a timing of 4.5 days around its star, so
I thought it was 11 days or so, but
I'm not sure. I think it was 4.5.
but I mean, you can check that
Yes.
easily enough. But yeah, if it transits and it's that rapid, then it's easy to build up high signal to noise ratios and see what's going on in the atmosphere. But it's important to stress that even if it doesn't transit, which it probably won't, there are still ways that you can probe its atmosphere, just not with instruments we have today, instruments that we'll have in the near future, like in the 2020s.
Yes, but talking about stars, habitable planets in the galaxy, I made a study of the stars, the types of stars, and I came to the conclusion that the stars that can have life are F-type stars, G-type stars, and the best stars for life, in my opinion, are K-type stars, which are between the red dwarfs and the solar type G. So, because red dwarfs have the great thing that, well, it's difficult for life to be comfortable there, but if it finds the way, it can be there for I've even read trillions of years in the star.
On M dwarfs, yes.
So that's a great thing, but it's really difficult for life to be comfortable in a red dwarf. So the K-type stars, which are between the solar and the red dwarfs, um, have the thing that the habitable zone is enough further away for the planet not to be locked gravitationally, and
Well, we don't
yes,
actually know whether tidal locking is actually a problem for life. We have a sample size of one. It's very difficult to say. We can say what would make us comfortable, but it's very difficult to generalize. There are actually a few papers that have done studies similar to what you've been talking about here, looking at what type of stars might actually be the most habitable, and also not just in terms of the stars, also in terms of what time in the history and future of the universe will be most optimal for life to evolve. I'll have to see if I can find one of those papers and I could send it over to you, because there have been studies into this.
yes, but I find fascinating that we live in a universe that, in my opinion, is really young. Because if you take a human life reference, it's really old. But when you think about space, you think about stars, and our sun is just second generation star. So, in my opinion, the universe is really young, and we may be the first civilization. We haven't thought that.
That's an interesting point, and that's one potential answer to the Fermi paradox, for instance. Why are we not seeing aliens everywhere if they could colonize the galaxy in 10 million years or less? I find it difficult to believe, though, that we would be the actual first when we've been finding exoplanets that have been in the habitable zone for substantially longer than we are. I mean, it's really a difficult question. I mean, part of the reason why I'm so interested in looking for evidence of life elsewhere in the universe is so that we can get some kind of empirical constraints on the Fermi paradox. I would very much like to know the answer to that, because if whatever the reason is that we seem to be alone is in our past, that's obviously fine. But if it's in our future, then we should be more actively concerned about that. And so any research that I can do to contribute to that obviously drives me. That's what keeps me awake at night. But I don't think that we're the first in the universe. We could be the first in our galaxy. I suppose that's reasonable. Although there was a study in 2013 that was looking at excess in infrared and microwave radiation from nearby galaxies as a signature of highly
Yes,
successful civilizations.
Dyson spheres and that.
Not just Dyson spheres. This would be a Kardashev 3 civilization. Dyson spheres would still be able to hide these signatures. But this study basically concluded that there are no Kardashev 3 civilizations in the local universe in the nearest 100,000 galaxies. So we'll see. I mean, the Fermi paradox is becoming more and more worrying. But yeah, we'll see. I'm very interested to find the answer.
But I don't think the Kardashev type 3 civilization could really be one civilization, because even if it's the same species, the speed of light is the speed of light. So if we colonize our entire galaxy, from one point to the other, it would be 90,000 million years. No, sorry, 90,000 years. Yes, for some information to go.
Oh, I mean, it wouldn't. You're right. It wouldn't be a single monoculture, for instance. I'm thinking more in terms of machine intelligences colonizing a galaxy, because fundamentally, what machines do, and we're obviously part of that, is we take in energy of one form and convert it into waste heat. You can't avoid that. It's part of the laws of thermodynamics. And so regardless of what kind of intelligence, whatever it might be, that takes over a galaxy, they will still have to produce this waste heat. That's why the waste heat signatures are a much better way to look for aliens than, say, looking for radio signals, because it's an inevitable consequence, regardless of what technology they use, that if they're there, they have to produce this waste heat. But yeah, you're absolutely right that the speed of light limits communication and all of that.
Well, but I think there's a way that we still don't know how to use it very well. But synchronizing microparticles, like we could transmit information by when an electron is, they can be synchronized, and when one turns in.
Oh, you're talking about what, quantum entanglement?
Yes.
Yeah, you can't actually communicate using quantum entanglement. That's a common misunderstanding. So you can have entangled particles such that if you measure the state of one of them, then the state of the other one becomes the opposite. But the issue is there's no way to control which way the state of the first particle collapses into. it's entirely random whether it's 0 or 1. So the information that's communicated is actually a random string of numbers, and there's no way to encode a message in it. So you unfortunately can't use quantum entanglement to communicate faster than light.
And do you think that we will ever make a warp machine to travel faster than light?
Oh, I would hope so. I mean, the maths behind it checks out. It does seem possible, but you have to invoke interesting concepts like negative energy, which we're not in. It's not entirely clear if we can make that on a large enough scale. I would like to hope that it's more of an engineering issue than a fundamental physics issue. So maybe we will get there one day.
Well,
we'll see. We'll see. But it's nice knowing that in principle it's possible.
I was thinking the other day, and I came to the conclusion that it is impossible. Maybe I'm wrong, but because the universe has some rules, and it makes sure that those rules aren't broken. So, for example, you can't travel to the past because that would completely destroy the timeline. So, if you are near something which is massive or producing energy, that makes a little distortion in the space-time. So if you are near a big black hole, you travel into the future. So if you visualize the space-time as a two-dimensional thing, it will be downwards because it has mass. So with negative energy, as energy is the same thing as matter, so it can be used to produce more mass. If you could use that, you could make a disturbance made upwards. So if you are in a disturbance which is upwards, you are really traveling into the past.
It's slightly more complicated than that. Into once you actually go into the mathematics of four-dimensional space-time and all of that, there are interesting potential paradoxes with causality that you can exploit if you are traveling faster than the speed of light. Some of them you can resolve if in your local reference frame you are not traveling faster than the speed of light, such that you're inside a warp bubble, for instance. Then that avoids many of the problems.
I'm not saying that it's impossible to, if you have the negative energy, travel faster than light. What I mean is that if negative energy was possible, which is required for the warp machine, then
negative energy is possible.
Then
I mean, you can produce negative energy in the Casimir effect. So we already know it exists.
Yes, but if you could have enough negative energy, you could actually travel to the past by, well, if you make a disturbance with positive mass or energy, and if you are near there, you travel to the future. So just a bit, but
there's a difference between negative energy and negative mass. Negative mass is a concept that doesn't really seem to have much of a physical meaning. It's a bit like, for instance, all types of mass produces a certain type of curvature in space-time. Now, you can get positive curvature, and you can also get negative curvature from different types of energy. But negative curvature isn't associated with travelling back in time. It's just based on whether the amount of mass in the universe is above a certain amount, whether you get positive or negative curvature. So it's not quite as simple as just having negative energy makes you travel back in time.
Do you prefer nuclear fusion or antimatter collision technology for the future?
So nuclear fusion is a way to actually produce energy as a power source. Antimatter is not a way to produce energy, it's a way to store energy, because you have to make the antimatter to start with. So if you want to make energy, nuclear fusion. If you want to go on starships in the future and you want a lot of energy stored when you're docking, then antimatter is the way to go.
All right, and what do you think of the theory of the multiverse, that our universe is just one in many?
Oh, this is interesting. I personally really like the theory, but the issue is that you want to have some measure of empirical evidence to support it. There have been some proposals of disturbances in the cosmic microwave background you could look for as signatures of like membranes colliding and all these things that are predicted by the multiverse theory, but none of those have really panned out yet. So For me, it's something that I think would be really nice and beautiful if it was true, and would explain lots of about the laws of physics we don't understand at the moment. But I won't put any faith into it until there is some kind of evidence to suggest that it might be correct.
Well, and one problem we have on Earth, there are some people that talk about these things, and the rest of the 99% of the world just is on Earth and just on Earth. So I think we nowadays have a huge problem, not just on technology but on human interest in doing space things.
Mm.
So
I mean, that's I think that ultimately, I mean, kind of going backwards slightly. I think this is one of the key reasons why we need to send humans to Mars, because when we sent people to the moon, in the 10 years following that, we had the number of people studying science at every level in the United States doubled. People will be more excited not just about space exploration, but about science as a whole if we can pull off a Mars mission. Or it's what we're seeing with exoplanets as well. People are getting more excited by science with all these potential habitable exoplanet discoveries. Space has the ability to inspire and excite people to want to get involved in science, because ultimately you don't need to have a very advanced level of understanding of science to appreciate space. And that's the hook, that's the attraction. It's much harder to excite people about condensed matter physics or particle physics, because those are very complicated fields that you need to study for years to understand, even though they're very applicable, but that's another story. So the 99% you allude to, if we can excite 10% of them or so, that would immeasurably improve our quality of life as a species, just to have those people that actually understand the scientific method. Because as scientists, what we fundamentally do is we base all our decisions and opinions on evidence. And if the wider population had a similar viewpoint, if politicians had a similar viewpoint of basing their decisions on evidence, then the world as a whole would be in a much better place than where it is at the moment. And that is one of the key reasons why I think Mars missions, exoplanets, all of this, and space as a whole is so important for our future.
talking about the future, there are two interesting fields that are advancing a lot right now, and they are genetics and AI and robotics. So I'm in a debate because as a species, um, I'm sure that we aren't going to evolve just with natural selection. That in a maximum of 100 years, that's going to disappear due to DNA modification or just robotics. So, what do you think we are going to be, in some millions of years? Genetically modified people or entirely machines?
I think it's much more likely that we'll go entirely machine. There will be certain human populations that still exist. For instance, we might have machine intelligences based on human consciousness that occasionally might download itself into a genetically modified body to do things like, I don't know, explore the surface of Mars or an asteroid, for instance, without having to worry about a spacesuit. That's possible, but I really think the way that it's going to go will be some kind of merger between our own consciousness and AI into an entirely non-biological medium. And I think that'll probably come a lot sooner than many people expect.
Yes, that's a point, but we have to know what is life before, because if you transfer yourself into a computer, is that you or not?
Oh, there's all manner of interesting questions about this. That's probably better to leave to the philosophers. And I know there's a lot of people, for instance, like over in Oxford, for instance, working at the Future of Humanity Institute, that spend all of their days worrying about things like this. I don't know, because consider, even if it's not actually you, but it's something that has all of your memories perfectly preserved and acts in the way that you act, that still is better than just your consciousness flickering out
Yes.
and just you no longer existing in the universe. So I don't really think it matters that much whether it's you or not, but it's a way of remembering who you are and immortalizing you. So yeah, I don't see any obvious objections in that.
Yes, but um, about genetics, do you think we are going to genetically modify animals to be on Mars, or that we are just going to take the ones that we think are better to live on Mars?
I think initially there will be some genetic modification, just like with algae, for instance. You might say get genetically modified bees, for instance, which are more efficient at pollinating plants.
And that don't bite?
Eventually, sorry?
Bees that don't bite? Yes.
Maybe. It's worse than a problem. Bees are all right. Eventually, though, once the atmosphere becomes more thick and more hospitable, then I don't think you'll have to genetically modify them. Then you might get species like caribou, for instance, that won't need to be genetically modified. But initially, yes.
Going back to life in the universe, I think gravity is something we have to take in account, because if there's a planet which has, it's a super Earth like 6 times the size of Earth, it probably will have a huge gravity. So life can obviously adapt to that things, but it would be a species which would have it terribly difficult to evolve, because it would have to be extreme life. So intelligent life would be difficult, and if it emerges, they will have it really difficult to go into space, because we now on Earth have
The higher escape velocity.
a 2% useful payload, more or less, that can improve, but not infinitely. But in a 6 times larger planet, that's going to be a huge problem.
It's important to note, though, that it's not just about the planet being larger or heavier. It's both the mass and the radius that determines the gravitational field. And generally, when the mass increases, the radius does increase. So the surface gravity wouldn't increase by ridiculous factors. I think it's unlikely you'll see a super Earth with more than, say, 4 times the gravity on the Earth. But no, your point absolutely holds, that it would have interesting implications for the development of a species if it couldn't leave its home planet, for instance.
Yes, and so I think we were really lucky with the place we appeared on, the solar system, because the planet that we can colonize, Mars, is smaller. So I think that's something which is easier for us, because it's easier to terraform and to send things.
And easier to launch off the surface as well.
Yes. So what do you think we would be doing if Mars didn't exist?
Oh, if Mars didn't exist? That's an interesting question. I think we'd be focusing much more on Venus, to be fair, because there are ways that you could make habitable cloud cities also in Venus, and there are certain altitudes above the clouds in Venus where temperatures are Earth-like and the pressure is about a bar as well. So I think Venus would be more of the focus.
Yes, there are some people. Venus is feasible, but not for terraforming. But there are some people I've seen.
Well, it is just it's just a lot harder than Mars.
Yes, that's too futuristic. And there are some people which think that Venus should be terraformed first than Mars, and I think that's absolutely mad. Mars is.
No, I agree. Yes. That's crazy.
Yes, there was a video in, I think, I don't remember the name. I think it was PBS Space Time. They made a video.
PBS Space Time. Yeah, they make good videos.
Yes, I know, but I was surprised to find that they preferred Venus. Mars is much better.
I think they were more just playing the devil's advocate, because I did some work on the European Space Agency's Venus Express mission when I was an undergraduate, looking at cloud structures and so in Venus. And there really is a feel in the community that Venus gets neglected just because of so many missions going to Mars. And there's a lot of interesting science still to be done on Venus, a lot we don't know about it. So I think it's absolutely fair for them to play the devil's advocate and advocate for missions to Venus, because everyone else was advocating for Mars, so why not?
Yes. But I have a really practical way of watching the solar system, because I see Mercury as a mine place. Yes, a place to mine and get materials. Venus, I'm not really sure, because we could make cloud cities on Venus, but the sun will just expand and become hotter, so Venus is hardest now.
Well, yeah, but you're talking
Yes,
you're talking billions of years
I
from
mean
now.
Venus, yes, can go worse. It can't go better, or it would be very difficult. So I'm not sure about Venus, and I see the moon as not a place to colonize because yes, you can go there and make a base and make some really good science. But then when you are done, I think it would be interesting for the moon to have a big city, but just that, to be a place to launch the
Yeah.
biggest spaceships. Lots of smaller ones from
Well,
Earth. Yes.
my idea is that what you should have is you should have a space elevator connecting the moon to the oh, I always forget which one it is, the L2 Lagrangian point, where the gravity of Earth and the moon exactly cancel out. And then at that point, at the top of the space elevator, there you should have a large dockyard which is used for building these spaceships. I think that would be the most ideal solution. You're shipping up resources extracted on the moon industrially up the space elevator, which could be made of something as simple as Kevlar, for instance, for a lunar space elevator, and then assembling them over there. That would be the best solution, but I completely agree that the moon is much more for science and industry than as a place suitable for long-term settlement.
Yes. Then Mars is, I think, for me, is home number two.
Yes, home number two, yes.
Um,
Yeah, it's the perfect place to go.
and then for Jupiter, I just see useful the moons. Europa, great for underground cities. Not as good as a planet, but some good thing. And the other moons, yes, more mines. And the same with Saturn. Enceladus and Titan as possible homes, and the rest for mining. But how much time do you think we have left until we go into space? Seriously, not just sending some machines.
So I think the first real attempt to do this, well, the public needs to believe that it's not science fiction. It will be very interesting to see what the public perception of the Mars Colonial Transporter announcement is. Because if people genuinely think it's possible for 100 people at once to go to Mars, and their friends are signing up, once people start noticing that, hey, there was that person in my neighborhood that signed up to go to Mars, it becomes more normalized. Once it becomes normalized, then we will start seeing large numbers of people going and living and working in space. So if we get fortunate, then I think we could be seeing it much more normalized around 2050 or so.
Yes, and do you think it's more likely to be discovered life on Mars or on Jupiter, Moon, Europa, or Enceladus on Saturn?
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting question. So there are obviously some chances that we could discover life on Mars, like ExoMars, which we're building in the European Space Agency. I think it's probably more likely that we'll find life on Europa, though, because it's just literally as simple as just fly through one of the vents, the geysers coming out of Europa, with a petri dish, scoop up some microbes, and hey, you're done. That's much simpler than on Mars, where you have to dig meters down because of the radiation at the surface.
Huge ocean,
so I think it's more likely.
the huge ocean in Europa is, I think it's more difficult to find it in Europa because that huge sea is underground. I think it was 100 kilometers.
Yes.
Something like that.
Oh, no. There are places that are much thinner. My point is that you don't have to land. There are actually a few gaps where water has been seen spraying out, and you can fly through it and collect some water samples, and then just look in the water and see if there's microbes. Because then if there's life anywhere in the ocean of Europa, it'll be full of microbes. So that's actually much easier to do than Mars.
I thought that was in Enceladus, in Saturn.
Oh, it is both. We see them all the time on Enceladus, but there have been a few potential detections on Europa. But yes, it's not as frequent as Enceladus, though.
Yes, but Enceladus is like a smaller version of Europa. So, if
Yes.
water is all the time coming out of there, now it wouldn't be so difficult to send. I mean, Cassini was not prepared for that discovery, but a new machine could be equipped with something just to answer the question, because the syllabus just shows us the water.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, this is part of the reason why we need to continue having science missions going out there. And so, I don't know, maybe the European Space Agency will push ahead with that. I know there's a lot of people that are also interested in a mission to send an orbiter to Uranus, which obviously we've only had a flyby there, and there's so much more science to be done out there. So, that, I mean, there's no shortage of excellent science to be done out there. And so that's why I'm so optimistic that with the private spaceflight sector coming along and lowering the cost of launches, maybe we can then have budgets more focused on actually the science, because rockets become cheaper. So I'm optimistic generally about the direction that we're going. And I won't be able to stay for that much longer, though, because I have more science than I'm doing at the moment myself.
Yes, we had a really long conversation. So it was great to talk to you. Maybe we can have another conversation another day, or...
Yeah, no, it's been absolutely a pleasure. And particularly, so I've been very impressed by the high quality caliber of your questions, which shows that you're obviously an incredibly intelligent young man who has a very bright future. Just keep pursuing science and figure out what it is that you most enjoy and you're passionate about, and then don't let anyone stop you from pursuing it.
Thanks. Well, see you next time. Bye.
Yep, see you next time. Bye for now.